Imagine waking up as a ghost in your own marriage, then finding the emails that prove your husband, Chicago's golden boy, has scripted your breakdown, stolen your money, and plans to debut his new power couple at the governor's gala. That's Madison Sterling's day one. What she does next turns a penthouse prison into a war room. Hidden recordings, forged signatures, a sister with receipts, and a friend with 50 grand and a getaway plan. But here's the twist. When the mask slips, it's not just adultery. It's corruption, a murder conspiracy, and a takedown that ends in handcuffs on live TV. Stay with me for the next hour to hear how a woman everyone called unstable became the one thing Chicago's most dangerous man never planned for. Unstoppable. If this hooked you, tap like so more people find it. Drop a comment with your wildest prediction. Share it with a friend who loves high-stakes drama, and hit subscribe so you don't miss the moment the hunter becomes the hunted. Madison Sterling stood in the doorway of their Chicago penthouse, watching her husband pack for another business trip. James moved with practiced efficiency, folding his shirts with the same precision he brought to everything in his political career. 7 years of marriage, and she still felt like a ghost in her own home. "I'll be back Thursday night," James said without looking up. "The Springfield meetings should wrap up by noon." Madison nodded, though he wasn't watching. She'd learned to exist in these spaces between his attention, these moments when she was physically present but emotionally invisible. The afternoon sun caught the dust motes floating through their bedroom, and she wondered when she'd become one of them. Barely there, easily overlooked. James's laptop chimed from the dresser. He was already in the bathroom, the shower running. Madison glanced at the screen, a habit born from years of being his unofficial secretary, the woman who'd given up her tech startup to support his rise through Chicago politics. The notification glowed. "Annual Governor's Gala next Saturday. Remember Sierra's dress fitting at 3 p.m. Sierra Wells, James's campaign manager, 26 years old with a Georgetown degree and ambitions that Madison recognized because she'd once had them herself. The shower stopped. Madison stared at the notification, her mind processing what her heart already knew. In 7 years, James had never once taken her to the governor's gala. She'd asked the first 3 years, then stopped when his excuses became too painful to hear. "It's boring political stuff, Maddie. You'd hate it. All schmoozing and fake smiles." "Did my laptop make a noise?" James emerged from the bathroom, towel around his waist. "Just a notification," Madison said, her voice steady. "About the governor's gala." Something flickered in his eyes. Was it panic? But James Sterling didn't panic. He was deputy mayor of Chicago, soon to announce his congressional run. He controlled every narrative, every room he entered. "Oh, that," he said, turning back to his suitcase. "Another tedious evening of political theater. You're lucky I shield you from these things." Madison felt the words bubbling up, years of swallowed questions finally finding their voice. "Why does Sierra need a dress fitting for it?" James's hands stilled for just a moment. "She's coordinating with the other campaign managers. Image consistency. You know how these political types are about appearances." "Do the other wives go?" He zipped his suitcase with unnecessary force. "Some do, the ones who enjoy being props." He finally looked at her, his blue eyes that had once made her feel seen now making her feel examined. "Is this really what you want to discuss right before I leave? You know how these conversations exhaust me, Madison." There it was, the subtle shift that made her questions seem unreasonable, her curiosity a burden. She'd once run a startup that had investors begging for meetings. Now she couldn't even get a straight answer about a party. "I'm sorry," she heard herself say, the automatic response that had become her default. James crossed to her, kissed her forehead, that paternal gesture that made her feel like a child rather than a wife. "Don't wait up Thursday. The flight might be delayed." After he left, Madison sat on their bed, staring at his laptop. The screen had locked, but she knew the password. Their anniversary date, 02/14/2017. She'd suggested changing it once for security, but James had laughed. "Who's going to guess that, Maddie? It's not like we're celebrities whose wedding was in magazines." Her fingers hovered over the keyboard. This wasn't who she was. She didn't snoop, didn't violate trust. But then again, who was she anymore? The woman who'd once pitched to venture capitalists now spent her days arranging flowers for political fundraisers. She wasn't important enough to attend. She typed the password. The laptop opened to his email. She almost closed it immediately, but a subject line caught her eye. Madison's situation for the gala. Her heart hammered as she clicked. The email was from Sierra to James, dated 3 days ago. I've had my dress fitting confirmed for 3 p.m. as discussed. Excited for our debut as Chicago's new power couple. The photographer from Tribune will be there. Liz Harper isn't covering this year, thank God. Can you imagine if your sister-in-law saw us together? Though honestly, from what you've told me about Madison's current state, maybe it's time people knew the truth. James's reply was below. Let's be strategic. I've been laying groundwork about her instability for months. After the gala, we can be more public. The separation story is ready. Mutual decision, focusing on different paths, etc. By the time I announce the congressional run, you'll be at my side as my campaign manager who became something more. Classic political love story. Madison read it 3 times, each word cutting deeper than the last. Instability, separation story, campaign manager who became something more. She scrolled down, finding more emails, each one a dagger. James discussing her mental health issues with the colleagues. Sierra forwarding venue options for after everything is official. A thread about moving assets that made her blood run cold. The bedroom door opened. Madison's heart stopped. But it was only their housekeeper, Maria, who'd worked for them for 5 years. The older woman took one look at Madison's face and stopped. Mrs. Sterling, are you all right? Madison closed the laptop slowly. Maria, have you ever felt like you're living someone else's life? Maria's eyes softened with the weight of unspoken knowledge. She'd seen the late nights James didn't come home, the excuses that didn't add up. Sometimes, Mrs. Sterling, we need to wake up to live our own. Madison's sister answered on the second ring. Hey, Maddie, rough morning? Liz Harper's voice carried the casual warmth of someone between stories, probably sitting in the Tribune newsroom with her feet on her desk. Madison could picture her, auburn hair in a messy bun, coffee growing cold while she chased leads. Liz, I need to ask you something. Madison moved to the window, watching the Chicago skyline blur through tears she refused to let fall. And I need you to be honest. The pause told her everything. What's going on? The governor's gala. Do other political wives attend? Another pause, longer this time. Madison could hear her sister's breathing, could practically see her debating how much truth to share. Yes, Liz said finally, they do. Have you known James was taking Sierra? The silence stretched so long, Madison thought the call had dropped. Then quietly, Maddie, maybe we should meet for coffee. You knew. The words came out flat, emotionless. How long? Madison, how long, Liz? 6 months, maybe longer. I wasn't sure at first, and I didn't want to hurt you without proof. Madison laughed, a hollow sound that echoed in their pristine penthouse. Proof? I just read emails where my husband and his campaign manager are planning their debut as a couple. Is that enough proof? You read his emails? Madison, that's what? Wrong? Unethical? More wrong than everyone in my life knowing my marriage is over except me? She heard Liz moving, probably leaving the newsroom for privacy. I wanted to tell you, God, Maddie, I've wanted to tell you for months, but James, he's powerful now. He's been telling people you're fragile, that you've been struggling with depression. I was afraid if I told you and you confronted him, he'd what? Leave me? Madison's laugh was bitter. Apparently he's already done that. Can you meet me, please? Don't do anything rash. Madison looked around the penthouse, the carefully curated life she'd built to support James's ambitions. The modern art they'd bought to impress his colleagues. The designer furniture that was beautiful but uncomfortable. The flowers she arranged weekly for dinner parties where she played the perfect political wife. I need to go to the bank, Madison said. I need to understand what's happening with our finances. Madison, wait. She hung up. The walk to Chase Bank took 20 minutes. Madison had always loved Chicago's energy, but today the city felt different. Hostile, watching. She wondered how many people had seen James with Sierra. had smiled at her while knowing her husband was planning his escape. The bank manager, Mr. Rodriguez, had always been friendly. Today, his expression when she asked about their joint accounts made her stomach drop. "Mrs. Sterling, I'm showing that you were removed from the primary accounts last month." "Removed? That's impossible. Those are joint accounts." He typed something, frowning. "The documentation shows you signed to the transfer papers. Your signature is on file." "I never signed anything." Mr. Rodriguez's discomfort was palpable. Perhaps Mr. Sterling handled it. Sometimes spouses manage these things for each other. Madison thought of all the documents James had asked her to sign over the years. Campaign finances, tax returns, property papers. She trusted him completely, signed where he pointed, believed when he said it was routine. "How much is in the accounts I can access?" More typing. "You have $1,200 in your personal checking." $1,200. She'd given up a company that would have been worth millions. She'd supported James through law school, through his early campaigns, through every step of his rise. $1,200. "Is there anything else?" Mr. Rodriguez asked gently. Madison shook her head, unable to speak. Outside the bank, her phone buzzed. "James, heard you were at the bank. Everything okay? Remember, major financial decisions should be discussed together." He was tracking her. Of course he was. Deputy Mayor James Sterling didn't leave anything to chance. She walked home slowly, her mind racing. The doorman nodded as she entered, but his smile seemed different now. Was it pity? Did he know too? In the elevator, Mrs. Garrison from the 15th floor pressed against the far wall, avoiding eye contact. They'd had coffee last week. Had she known then? The penthouse felt like a crime scene. Madison moved through it methodically, opening drawers, checking files. Their wedding photos mocked her from the mantel, her radiant smile, his possessive hand on her waist. Had he ever loved her, or had she always been a convenient stepping stone? In his home office, she found more evidence. Credit card statements showing jewelry purchases she'd never received, restaurant receipts from nights he'd claimed to be in Springfield, hotel charges at the Peninsula when he was supposedly at conference. Her phone rang. Marcus Davidson. She almost didn't answer. Marcus had been her business partner before James convinced her to sell her shares. He'd built their startup into a tech empire while she'd played political wife. "Madison, I heard about James and Sierra." Of course he had. Does everyone know except me? "I wanted to call sooner. I'm sorry. I know that's inadequate, but I'm sorry for everything." She remembered the day she told Marcus she was leaving the company. His expression? Disappointment mixed with something else. Had he known even then what James was? "The company would be worth $2 billion now," Marcus said quietly. "Your half would have set you up for life. Instead, I have $1,200 and a husband who's been planning his exit strategy for months. Madison, let me help, please." She wanted to say yes, wanted to accept the lifeline from the one person who'd believed in her abilities, not just her potential as a trophy wife. But James had taught her well, everything had a price. "I need to think. I'm here when you're ready. And Madison, you're still the smartest person I know. Don't let him make you forget that." After she hung up, Madison sat in the gathering darkness. Tomorrow, James would return from Springfield. She could confront him, demand answers, fight for her marriage. Or she could plan. The Madison who'd built a startup from nothing was still in there, somewhere beneath the perfect wife facade. That woman wouldn't react emotionally. She'd gather information, assess options, execute strategically. She opened her laptop and began making lists. Assets she could access, documents she needed, lawyers who weren't in James's pocket. It was like preparing for a board meeting, except this time she was fighting for her life. James returned Thursday at midnight, not on the delayed flight he'd texted about, but on an earlier one. Madison knew because she checked the arrivals. She was sitting in the dark living room when he entered, silhouetted against the city lights. "Madison, why are you sitting in the dark?" She turned on the lamp beside her. How was Sierra's dress fitting? He froze in the doorway, suit jacket over his arm, face cycling through calculations. She watched him decide on confusion. "What are you talking about?" "The notification on your laptop for the governor's gala. Sierra's dress fitting at 3 p.m. "You went through my laptop?" His voice shifted to indignation. Offense as defense, a classic James Sterling maneuver. You're having an affair with your 26-year-old campaign manager, and you're concerned about laptop privacy? He set down his jacket with deliberate calm. Madison, you're being paranoid. This is exactly the kind of behavior that concerns me. What concerns you? That I discovered your emails planning our separation? Or that I found out you've been telling people I'm mentally unstable? You need help. His voice was gentle now, patronizing. This paranoid delusion. I have screenshots. That stopped him. For the first time in years, Madison saw genuine surprise on his face. Screenshots of what? Some out-of-context emails that your anxious mind has twisted into. Of you telling Sierra you've been laying groundwork about my instability for months. Of her calling you two Chicago's new power couple. Of you discussing asset transfers that happened without my knowledge. James moved to the bar, poured himself a scotch. His hands were steady. He was already regrouping, strategizing. You're misinterpreting things. Sierra and I work closely together. The campaign demands it. The campaign demands you take her to the governor's gala instead of your wife. You hate those events. His voice carried forced patience. You've always said political gatherings make you uncomfortable. Because you told me they would. Because you said I wouldn't fit in. Because you made me believe I was better off at home. He turned and she saw the mask drop for just a moment. The real James, calculating, cold, already 3 moves ahead. What do you want, Madison? The truth, for once. He laughed, a sound like ice cracking. The truth? The truth is you gave up. You stopped trying to be the partner I needed. You became comfortable being kept, living off my success while contributing nothing. Each word was precisely chosen to wound. I gave up my company for you. Your little startup? His dismissal was casual, devastating. It would have failed within 2 years. I saved you from that humiliation. It's worth $2 billion now. Because Marcus is a visionary, you were just along for the ride. Madison stood, her legs surprisingly steady. I'm leaving. No, you're not. He didn't move, didn't raise his voice. You have no money. Don't think I don't know about your pathetic bank visit. You have no friends who aren't connected to my career. Your family depends on my goodwill. How do you think Liz got that Tribune position? You're threatening my sister's job. I'm explaining reality. You'll stay. We'll continue our arrangement. After the election, we'll quietly divorce. You'll be provided for if you cooperate. And if I don't, his smile was terrible in his confidence. Then you'll discover how hard I can make things. Depression is a serious illness, Madison. Sometimes it requires professional intervention. You're threatening to have me institutionalized? I'm suggesting you think carefully about your next moves. The documentation already exists. Therapist notes about your anxiety, prescriptions for antidepressants, concerned calls from your husband about erratic behavior. Madison felt the walls closing in. Every therapy session she'd attended to deal with the loneliness of her marriage, every prescription for anxiety medication, every vulnerable moment, he'd been building a case. You planned this. I plan everything. He finished his scotch. I'm going to bed. We have the Harrison fundraiser tomorrow night. Wear the blue dress. And Madison, your performance as my wife needs to continue. Sierra understands the timeline. Don't make this harder than necessary. After he went to the bedroom, Madison remained standing, trembling with rage and fear. Her phone buzzed. Dobameon. Marcus. Offer stands. No strings. She stared at the message. James controlled so much, but he couldn't control everyone. Not Marcus, who'd become too powerful to threaten. Not the truth, no matter how he tried to twist it. She texted back, "Can you meet tomorrow?" Name the place. Madison looked toward the bedroom, where her husband was probably already asleep, untroubled by conscience. He thought he'd won, that she was trapped by his careful planning. But James had made one mistake. He'd threatened Liz. And Madison Sterling might have forgotten who she was, but she remembered how to fight when someone she loved was threatened. The coffee shop in Lincoln Park was deliberately neutral, not somewhere James's circle gathered, not anywhere Madison was known as the deputy mayor's wife. Marcus was already there, looking unchanged despite the years and billions between now and their startup days. "You look like hell," he said gently, charming as ever. Madison sat grateful for honesty after days of deception. "James knows I know. And he's threatened to have me institutionalized if I don't play along. Says he has documentation of my mental instability." Marcus's expression darkened. "That bastard. He's also leveraging Liz's job at the Tribune, and he's moved all our assets. I have $1,200 to my name. Madison, I gave up everything for him." The words tumbled out. "The company, my career, my identity. I became this hollow version of myself, and for what? So he could trade up to a younger model with better political connections?" Marcus reached across the table, stopping just short of taking her hand. "You're not hollow. You're the woman who coded our entire platform in 72 hours when our developer quit. You're the one who convinced Morrison Ventures to fund us when everyone said we were too risky. That woman doesn't exist anymore." "She does. She's just been in survival mode." Madison laughed bitterly. "Surviving what? A penthouse prison? Designer clothes? The exhausting burden of being married to Chicago's rising political star? Surviving emotional abuse." Marcus's voice was firm. "What James has done, the gaslighting, the isolation, the financial control, it's abuse, Madison." The word hit her like cold water. Abuse. She'd thought of it as unhappiness, disappointment, a failed marriage. But abuse? "I can't even leave. He's made sure of that." Marcus pulled out his phone, showed her a banking app. "There's $50,000 in this account. Cash, untraceable. It's yours." "Marcus, I can't." "You can, you will. Because the Madison I knew wouldn't let anyone cage her. Not even James Sterling. He'll find out. He tracks everything." "Not this. I had my best security team set it up. Offshore routing, encrypted transfers. James might be powerful, but I have resources he can't touch." Madison stared at the phone screen. $50,000. Freedom. Hope. "What's the catch?" Marcus smiled sadly. "No catch. Just a friend helping a friend. Though if you wanted to consult on my new project once you are free, I wouldn't say no. James will destroy you if he finds out. Let him try. I'm not the struggling entrepreneur he remembers. I have lawyers who eat political scandals for breakfast." Madison's phone buzzed. "James, where are you?" She showed Marcus the text. He shook his head. "Controlling bastard." She typed back. "Shopping for tonight's fundraiser." "James, use the credit card I left on the dresser. The blue dress is at the cleaners." Even her clothes were controlled. Madison felt the familiar suffocation, but now it had a name. Abuse. "I'll take the money," she said quietly, "but I need to be smart about this. James has been planning his exit for months. I need my own strategy." "What do you need?" "Time, information, and a lawyer he can't buy." Marcus pulled out a business card. "Catherine Walsh. She handled my divorce. She's in New York, outside James's sphere. He'll know if I contact a divorce lawyer." "Not if you're careful. Use a burner phone, meet her outside the city. Madison, you need to document everything. Every threat, every controlled penny, every lie." "I've started. Screenshots, recordings on my phone." "Good. Where will you go when you leave?" The question she'd been avoiding. Where could she go that James wouldn't find her? "I don't know. He has connections everywhere. I have a place, downtown, high security, doorman building. It's under a shell company. James won't be able to trace it." "You've thought of everything." "I've been thinking about this since the day you told me you were marrying him." Marcus's voice carried old regret. "I should have said something then. I wouldn't have listened. I was in love." "And now?" Madison thought about it. "Now I'm just trying to survive with some dignity intact." Her phone rang. "Liz." "I have to take this," Madison answered. "Hey, where are you? James called the Tribune looking for you. Said you've been acting erratic." "I'm fine. I'm with Marcus." "Marcus Davidson." "Madison, be careful. James will use that against you." "Let him. Liz, he threatened your job." Silence. Then, "I know. My editor already mentioned I might be reassigned from political coverage. James's reach is longer than we thought. I'm going to leave him." Thank God. But Maddie, you need to be strategic. He's been laying groundwork to discredit you. There are rumors about your mental health, about possible substance abuse. Substance abuse? I barely drink. Truth doesn't matter in politics. Perception does. And James has been crafting a very specific perception of you. Madison felt the trap tightening. Every move she made, James had already anticipated, already countered. What do I do? Document everything. Get your own narrative out there. And Maddie, consider going public before he does. After she hung up, Marcus was watching her with concern. How bad? He's telling people I have substance abuse issues. Marcus's curse was creative and extensive. We need to move faster. Tonight at the fundraiser, can you get more evidence? Recordings? Anything? He'll be watching me. Then give him what he expects to see. Play the perfect wife one more time while gathering what you need. Madison nodded slowly. One more performance. One more night of pretending. But this time, she wouldn't be a victim. She'd be a spy in her own life, gathering ammunition for the war James had started. I should go. He'll get suspicious. Marcus stood with her. Madison, be careful. Men like James, when they're cornered, he doesn't know he's about to be cornered. He thinks he's won. That's when he's most dangerous. The Harrison fundraiser was held at the Art Institute, Chicago's elite mingling beneath priceless masterpieces. Madison wore the blue dress James had selected, her smile perfectly calibrated as she moved through the crowd on his arm. You look beautiful tonight, James murmured, his hand possessive on her waist. To observers, they were the perfect couple. Only Madison felt his fingers dig in whenever she strayed too far. Sierra was already there, wearing a red dress that cost more than most people's monthly rent. She air-kissed James, lingering too long, her perfume marking territory. Madison! Sierra's enthusiasm was performance art. You look lovely. That dress is so appropriate. The dismissal was surgical. Madison smiled. Thank you. Your dress is certainly memorable. James's fingers tightened, a warning, but Madison was done being warned. I should powder my nose, she said sweetly. In the bathroom, she activated the recording app on her phone, slipping it into her clutch with the microphone exposed. Then she returned to the battlefield. Judge Harrison was holding court near the bar, his booming voice carrying. James, the man of the hour, when are you announcing the congressional run? Soon, Judge, very soon. And this lovely lady must be your secret weapon. He wasn't looking at Madison. Sierra laughed, musical and false. Oh, Judge Harrison, you flatter me. James tells me you're the brain behind his campaign. Beauty and brains, deadly combination. Madison stood there, invisible despite being inches away. The judge's wife, Patricia, touched her arm gently. Madison, dear, would you help me find the ladies' room? Grateful for the escape, Madison walked with the older woman. Patricia waited until they were alone. I've been where you are, she said quietly. 30 years ago. Different woman. Same story. I don't know what you mean. Patricia's smile was sad. Of course not. We never do until we do. But dear, document everything. The judge thought he was clever too. She left Madison standing in the hallway processing. How many political wives had been through this? How many had smiled through their humiliation? Madison returned to find James and Sierra deep in conversation with Congressman Davies, their bodies angled to exclude her. She approached anyway. The governor's gala will be perfect, Sierra was saying. Everyone who matters will be there. Speaking of which, Madison interjected, why haven't I received my invitation? The silence was deafening. James's face was stone. Darling, we've discussed this. You don't enjoy these events. I might surprise you. She turned to Davies. Congressman, does your wife attend the gala? Davies shifted uncomfortably. Always, wouldn't miss it. How lovely for her. Madison's smile was razor sharp. To be included. James's hand clamped on her elbow. Excuse us. He steered her to a corner, his voice low and dangerous. What are you doing? Existing. Is that allowed? You're embarrassing yourself. No, James, you're embarrassing me, but that's going to stop. His grip tightened. Remember what we discussed. Your sister, your stability, my dignity. Madison pulled free. You forgot that one. She walked away, her heart pounding. Her phone had been recording everything. James's threats, his control, all captured. The rest of the evening was torture. Madison watched James and Sierra work the room, their synchronized movements speaking of practiced intimacy. She drank water that looked like vodka, stayed visible, smiled until her face hurt. "You look tired," Sierra observed during dessert. "Perhaps you should go home early. James and I have several more meetings tonight." "Meetings," Madison let the word hang. "Of course." She gathered her things, kissed James's cheek for appearances. He whispered, "We'll discuss your behavior at home." Madison left but didn't go home. Instead, she went to Liz's apartment in Wicker Park. Her sister opened the door in pajamas, took one look at her, and pulled her inside. "That bad?" Madison handed her the phone. "Listen to this." They sat on Liz's couch, listening to the recordings. James's threats, Sierra's casual cruelty, the entire performance of Madison's erasure. "This is evidence," Liz said. "Clear abuse, coercion, threats. He'll say I recorded illegally." Illinois is a two-party consent state for recording, but there are exceptions for evidence of crime. Threatening someone's job, financial abuse, these could qualify. Could? We need a lawyer, a good one. Madison pulled out Catherine Walsh's card. "Marcus gave me this." Liz studied it. "She's legendary. Took down Senator Blake in that custody battle. But Madison, once you contact her, there's no going back." "There's already no going back." James made sure of that. Her phone buzzed. "James, where are you? Your location services are off." Madison showed Liz. Her sister's expression darkened. "He's tracking you?" "He tracks everything. My spending, my location, my calls." "That's not marriage, Maddie. That's imprisonment." Madison thought about the penthouse, its designer furniture and city views. A beautiful cage was still a cage. "I have money now, 50,000 from Marcus, enough to run." "You shouldn't have to run. This is your city too." "Not anymore. James has made sure of that. After tonight, everyone will know I'm the unstable wife who made a scene at the fundraiser." "You barely said anything." "I said enough. I didn't play my role. In James's world, that's unforgivable." They sat in silence, the weight of what came next settling over them. Madison had fired the first shot tonight. James would retaliate. "Stay here tonight," Liz said. "He'll come looking." "Let him. I'd love to get his threats on my doorbell camera." Madison almost smiled. "You're enjoying this." "I'm a journalist. Taking down corrupt politicians is literally my dream." "He's your brother-in-law." "Was. The minute he threatened my job, he became a story." Madison woke to 37 missed calls. James, his mother, his campaign staff, numbers she didn't recognize. The war had begun. Liz was already up, laptop open, coffee brewing. "You need to see this." On the screen was a Chicago Sun-Times article. "Deputy Mayor's wife kisses scene at fundraiser. Sources say mental health concerns." Madison read, her stomach dropping with each paragraph. Anonymous sources described her erratic behavior, her paranoid accusations, her deteriorating mental state. James was quoted expressing his deep concern and commitment to getting her help. "He moved fast," Madison said numbly. "There's more." Liz switched tabs. Social media was already spinning. Sierra had posted photos from the fundraiser, carefully cropped to exclude Madison. The comments were brutal, supporting James, calling Madison unstable, praising Sierra for her grace under pressure. Madison's phone rang. "Marcus, have you seen?" "I've seen. I'm sending my car. You need to get to New York. Meet with Catherine Walsh today." "James will know if I leave the city." "James already started the war. Time to fight back." An hour later, Madison was in the back of a black town car heading to New York. She'd thrown clothes in a bag, taken the cash Marcus had given her, left her tracked phone at Liz's. The drive gave her time to think, to plan. James had made the first public move, controlling the narrative. But he'd also made a mistake. He'd moved too fast, too aggressively. It would make him look calculating when the truth came out. Catherine Walsh's office was on the 40th floor of a Manhattan building that screamed power. The lawyer herself was 60, silver-haired, with eyes that had seen every dirty trick in the divorce playbook. Marcus called, told me the basics. She studied Madison over her glasses. The financial abuse is clear. The emotional abuse is documented. But James Sterling is connected, powerful, and he's already controlling the narrative. Can you help? I can destroy him. Catherine's smile was sharp. But it won't be pretty and it won't be private. Are you prepared for that? I'm prepared for anything. No, you're not. You're prepared for what you imagine. The reality will be worse. He'll attack your character, your family, your entire history. Every mistake you've made will become public. Every weakness will be exploited. He's already doing that. This is just the beginning. When men like James are threatened, they become vicious. I've seen them destroy women just to prove they can. Madison thought about the woman she'd been, the woman who'd built something from nothing. Then I'll build again from the ashes. Catherine nodded approvingly. Good. Now tell me everything. Every account he's hidden, every threat he's made, every affair he's had. They talked for 3 hours. Madison laid out 7 years of control, manipulation, isolation. The forced sale of her company shares, the gradual financial strangling, the affair with Sierra that everyone knew about except her. The recording from the fundraiser is particularly useful, Catherine said. Him threatening your sister's while grabbing you, that's evidence of coercion and assault. Assault seems extreme. Unwanted physical contact used to control or intimidate or this assault. The law doesn't require bruises. Madison's phone, a burner Marcus had provided, buzzed. Unknown number. Don't answer, Catherine started, but Madison had already picked up. Madison? James's mother, Eleanor Sterling, the Chicago matriarch who'd never approved of her son's choice of wife. What have you done? Eleanor, you're destroying him. Your petty jealousy, your mental problems. He tried so hard to help you. He's having an affair. Men have affairs, wives endure. That's how political marriages work. Not anymore. You little fool, you think you can fight the Sterling family? We've been in Chicago politics for 4 generations. You're nobody, a failed entrepreneur who got lucky marrying up. Madison felt the old shame rising, the inadequacy Eleanor had always made her feel. But then she thought of Patricia Harrison's words. How many wives had been through this? I may be nobody, Eleanor, but I have the truth. Truth? Eleanor laughed. Truth is what we say it is. By next week, everyone will know you're an unstable woman who had a breakdown. James is already arranging for your evaluation. What evaluation? Didn't he tell you? He's filed for an emergency psychiatric hold. Claims you're a danger to yourself. The papers should be served tomorrow. The phone went dead. Madison stared at Catherine, who was already typing. He's trying to have me committed? It's a tactic. File first, make you look crazy for defending yourself. But it requires evidence of immediate danger. What could he use? Madison thought about the anxiety medication, the therapy sessions, the wine she'd drunk alone while James worked late. Each innocent thing that could be twisted. Everything. He's documented everything. Then we file our own papers. Restraining order for domestic abuse, financial fraud charges, alienation of affection against Sierra. Can we do that? We can do more. But Madison, once we file, you can't go back to Chicago until there's a hearing. He'll have you arrested or hospitalized. Madison thought about her city, her life, everything she'd built there. Then I won't go back. Where will you stay? Before she could answer, her burner rang again. Liz, Maddie, don't come back. James had the police here. He's claiming you stole $50,000 from his campaign fund. What? That's Marcus's money? He's saying Marcus embezzled it from a joint investment they had, and you're complicit. There's a warrant. Madison sank into the chair. Every move she made, James had a counter. Every escape route he'd already blocked. What do I do? Run, Liz said. Get somewhere safe and let Catherine handle the legal fight. I'll work on the media angle. Your job is already gone. Editor called an hour ago. But Maddie, I've got enough dirt on James to bury him. I've been investigating him for months. You have? I'm your sister, and I'm a journalist. Did you think I'd watch him hurt you and do nothing? Madison spent the night in a hotel Catherine's firm used for protected witnesses. The irony wasn't lost on her. She was hiding from her husband like a fugitive. By morning, the story had evolved. James gave an interview to Channel 7, standing outside their penthouse, looking haggard and concerned. "I just want Madison to get help," he said to the camera. "Her family history of mental illness, combined with the stress of public life, she's not well. The money she took, the accusations she's making, it's all part of her delusion." The reporter, clearly in James's pocket, nodded sympathetically. "What about reports of your relationship with campaign manager Sierra Wells?" James's expression was pain perfection. "Sierra has been a tremendous support during this difficult time. Nothing more. These accusations are part of Madison's paranoia." Then Sierra appeared, young and beautiful, and crying on cue. "It's heartbreaking. Madison was like a mentor to me. To see her deteriorate like this, we just want her to get help." Madison threw the remote at the television. Catherine called immediately. "Don't watch the news." Too late. "We're filing our response today. Domestic abuse, financial fraud, defamation. The media will have a field day. They're already having one, at my expense. Trust the process." James is overplaying his hand. The crying mistress was too much. Madison wanted to believe her, but outside she could see news vans gathering. Someone had leaked her location. Her burner rang. "Marcus, there's a car in the parking garage. Blue sedan, keys under the passenger wheel. Get out now." Madison didn't question. She grabbed her bag, took the stairs, found the car. As she drove away, she saw police arriving at the hotel entrance. The car's GPS was programmed for an address in Connecticut. She drove in silence, her hands shaking. Every police car made her heart race. Every news report on the radio mentioned her name. The Connecticut address was a small farmhouse, isolated, peaceful. Marcus was waiting on the porch. "It's my aunt's place. She's in Europe. No connection to either of us that James would know. He's telling everyone I stole money." "Let him. I've already filed documentation showing it was a gift. He can't prove embezzlement when there was no embezzlement." Inside, the farmhouse was warm, lived in, normal. Madison hadn't felt normal in so long. "There's something else," Marcus said carefully. "Liz sent this." He handed her a tablet. On it was a Tribune exclusive, not in the paper, but on Liz's personal blog. "The Real Madison Sterling Story, A Sister's Perspective." Madison read her sister's words, tears streaming. Liz had laid out everything: the isolation, the control, the systematic destruction of Madison's identity. She'd included photos from before, when Madison was vibrant, successful, and photos from recently, showing the hollow shell she'd become. But the killing blow was the audio. Somehow Liz had gotten a recording of James from 2 years ago, drunk at a political event, bragging to colleagues. "Madison, she's handled, completely dependent. I made sure of that. Sold her company shares, moved the money offshore. She doesn't even know. Thinks she's living off my success. It's perfect. She's too broken to leave, too isolated to have options. The ideal political wife." Madison listened 3 times, each word a revelation. 2 years. He'd been planning this for 2 years. "How did she get this?" "Your sister is resourceful, and apparently Congressman Davies' wife records everything. Patricia Harrison, the woman who'd warned her at the fundraiser. The blog post was going viral. The narrative was shifting. But Madison knew James wouldn't accept defeat. Her burner rang. Unknown number. Against her better judgment, she answered. "You think you've won?" James's voice was ice. "I'm filing charges. Theft, defamation, cyber harassment. You'll be arrested the moment you surface." "With what evidence?" "I don't need evidence. I need accusations. By the time you're cleared, if you're cleared, your reputation will be destroyed. No one will hire you. No one will trust you. I have recordings obtained illegally, inadmissible. Madison, you're playing checkers. I'm playing chess. This isn't a game. Everything is a game. And you've lost. Come home. Sign the papers I've prepared. Take the settlement I'm offering. Disappear quietly." "No." "Then I'll destroy Liz. That blog post? I'll sue her for libel. She'll lose everything." "You can't. I'm deputy mayor of Chicago. I'm about to be a congressman. I can do anything." He hung up. Madison stared at the phone, then at Marcus. "He's going to destroy Liz." No, he's not. Marcus pulled out his laptop. Because we're going to destroy him first. How? Remember that government contract my company has? The one James helped secure? I've been documenting every kickback, every bribe, every illegal contribution. I didn't want to use it because it implicates me too, but you'd risk your company? I built it once. I can build it again. But Madison, you only get one chance to be free. She thought about the farmhouse's quiet peace, the possibility of a life without fear, without control. Do it! Marcus started typing. By tomorrow morning, the FBI will have everything. James Sterling's political career will be over. And Sierra? She's been skimming campaign funds. That's also in the documentation. Madison felt something she hadn't experienced in years. Hope. The FBI moved faster than expected. By dawn, news broke that Deputy Mayor James Sterling was under investigation for corruption. The footage of agents removing boxes from his office played on every channel. Madison watched from Connecticut, feeling disconnected from the drama. The woman being discussed on television, the wronged wife, the victim of a powerful man, felt like someone else. Catherine called. James's lawyers reached out. He wants to negotiate. No. Hear the offer. Full financial disclosure, restoration of your assets, $5 million settlement, and he drops all charges. In exchange for? Your silence. No interviews, no book, no public statements. He wants to buy my silence. It's not a bad deal, Madison. Madison thought about all the women who'd taken such deals, who'd disappeared quietly while men like James continued their lives. No, Fee. You're sure? I want my day in court. I want the truth public. Catherine sighed. Then prepare for war. The war came swift and brutal. James's team released medical records, selectively edited, suggesting Madison had been hospitalized for psychiatric issues. They produced witnesses who claimed she'd been unstable for years. They found an old college roommate who told stories of Madison's mood swings. Each revelation was a calculated hit, designed to undercut public sympathy. But Liz fought back with her own revelations. She published James's financial records, showing the systematic draining of Madison's assets. She found 3 other women who'd worked for James and experienced harassment. She documented a pattern of abuse that went back years. The public was divided. Team James painted Madison as a gold digger who'd lost her meal ticket. Team Madison saw her as a survivor of systematic abuse. Then Marcus played his trump card. There's something else, he told Madison over the phone. Something I didn't want to use unless necessary. What? Video from James's office. He had a security system he didn't know recorded audio. Of what? Him and Sierra, planning everything, including something about your father's death. Madison's blood ran cold. Her father had died 3 years ago in a car accident. What about my father? You should see for yourself. The video arrived encrypted. Madison watched alone. James and Sierra in his office, dated 6 months ago. The father-in-law situation resolved perfectly, James was saying. The insurance money set us up nicely. You're sure the investigator won't dig deeper? Sierra asked. He was drunk, ran off the road, case closed, and Madison's too grief-stricken to question anything. Still, cutting his brake lines was risky. Madison stopped the video, stopped breathing. Her father hadn't been drunk. He never drank. She called Catherine. They killed my father. Madison, watch the video. They killed him for insurance money. Catherine was silent after viewing it. Then, this changes everything. This is murder conspiracy. Send it to the FBI. Madison, if we do this, James won't just be ruined. He'll go to prison for life. Madison thought about her father, gentle, kind, always believing the best in people. He'd loved James like a son. But the arrest happened at the governor's gala. James was on stage with Sierra, about to announce his congressional run despite the corruption investigation, when the FBI entered. The footage was cinematic. Sierra trying to run in her gown, James maintaining his composure even as they read him his rights. Madison watched from Connecticut, feeling nothing. The man being arrested was a stranger. The woman crying on television was nobody she knew. Her phone rang constantly, publishers wanting her story, movie producers offering deals. Everyone wanted to hear from the woman who had brought down James Sterling. She turned them all down. Instead, she met with the FBI, gave testimony, provided evidence. She sat through depositions where James's lawyers tried to break her, to make her seem unstable, vindictive. But the evidence was overwhelming. The financial fraud, the bribes, the murder conspiracy. James Sterling, Chicago's golden boy, was going to prison. Sierra flipped immediately, testifying against James for a reduced sentence. She painted herself as another victim, manipulated by a powerful man. It was almost convincing. The trial lasted 3 months. Madison testified for 2 days, describing the years of control, the isolation, the fear. She produced the recordings, the emails, the documentation of abuse. James's defense was that Madison was delusional, that she'd fabricated everything. But the murder conspiracy video destroyed any credibility he had. The verdict was guilty on all counts, life in prison without parole. As they led James away, he looked at Madison one last time. His expression wasn't anger or hatred, it was disbelief. He'd never imagined losing. 6 months after the verdict, Madison stood in the empty penthouse. The furniture was gone, sold at auction. The art had been returned to the galleries James had bought it from with stolen money. Only the view remained, Chicago sprawling below. She'd won everything in the civil trial. The assets were returned, the properties restored, the hidden accounts discovered, $15 million total. More money than she'd ever imagined. But her father was still dead. 7 years of her life were still gone. And the woman she'd been, optimistic, trusting, whole, that woman was gone too. Liz found her there. The movers are here for the last boxes. I'm selling it. Good. Too many ghosts. Madison turned from the window. Her sister looked older, worn by the fight. They'd won, but at what cost? The Tribune offered me the political editor position, Liz said. Because of the story? Because I'm good at my job, but the story didn't hurt. Take it. What about you? Marcus says the offer stands to join his new venture. Madison had thought about it, returning to tech, to the world she'd abandoned. But that woman, the one who'd coded for 72 hours straight, who'd pitched to venture capitalists, she was gone too. I need to disappear for a while. Madison, not forever, just until I figure out who I am now. Liz hugged her, fierce and protective. You're my sister. You're a survivor. That's enough. But it wasn't. Madison had survived, but survival wasn't living. She left Chicago that night, flew to Seattle where no one knew her face, rented a small apartment under her maiden name, got a job at a coffee shop where the biggest decision was milk or oat milk. For 3 months, she was nobody. It was peaceful. Then Catherine called. Sierra Wells is being released early. Good behavior. 3 months for conspiracy to commit murder? She testified against James, made a deal. That's justice, Madison laughed, bitter. That's not justice. No, but it's law. There's a difference. That night, Madison sat in her Seattle apartment, staring at the rain. James was in prison, but Sierra was free. Her father was dead, but she had $15 million. She'd won, but felt empty. Her phone buzzed. Unknown number. She almost didn't answer. Ms. Sterling, this is Agent Sarah Chen, FBI. We have a proposition. I'm not testifying again. Not testimony, employment. We're starting a task force on political corruption. We need someone who understands how these men operate, how they hide assets, how they control victims. You want me to work for the FBI? As a consultant, help us identify and protect victims of similar abuse. Help us build cases against men like James. Madison thought about all the Patricia Harrisons, all the political wives smiling through their humiliation. I'm not qualified. You survived James Sterling and brought him down. You're overqualified. It would mean returning to that world, reliving her trauma to help others. It would mean facing her demons daily. Yes. 2 years later, Madison sat in a federal building in Washington, D.C., reviewing files on Senator William Crawford. Another powerful man, another young mistress, another wife being systematically destroyed. She'd helped convict 6 politicians in 2 years. Each case was different, but the pattern was the same. Financial control, emotional abuse, public humiliation. These men had a playbook, and Madison knew every page. Her phone rang. Marcus. How's the nation's capital? Corrupt? You? Rich. Guilty. The company went public yesterday. Congratulations. It should have been our company. Madison looked at the photos on her desk. Her father, Liz, the woman she'd been when she believed in love. That life's gone, Marcus. Malted, because I'm looking at someone who rebuilt herself from ashes, who took the worst thing that ever happened and turned it into purpose. Purpose isn't happiness. No, but it's a start. After they hung up, Madison returned to the Crawford file. The wife, Jennifer, had reached out secretly, desperate for help. Madison called her from a secure line. Jennifer, this is Madison Sterling. I understand you need help. They said you survived, that you got out. I did, but it cost everything. I have nothing left to lose. Madison heard herself in those words, the desperation, the defeat. Yes, you do. You have yourself, and that's enough to start. He's too powerful, his connections. James Sterling was deputy mayor of Chicago. He's now in federal prison. But the humiliation, the public destruction, is temporary. Your freedom is forever. They talked for an hour. Madison shared strategies, resources, contacts. She gave Jennifer what no one had given her, a roadmap through hell. After the call, Madison walked to the window. Washington stretched before her, a city of power and secrets. She'd never be the woman she was, trusting, optimistic, whole. But she was something else now, useful. Her phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number. She expected another victim reaching out. Instead, it was a photo. Sarah Wells at a charity event, laughing, champagne in hand, a new powerful man on her arm. The old Madison would have raged at the injustice. This Madison simply forwarded the photo to Agent Chen with a note. Watch this one. Justice wasn't perfect. Victory was hollow. But every woman she helped escape was a small redemption. The office was quiet now, just Madison and her files. Tomorrow, she'd fly to Chicago to testify in another case. The city that had been her prison would see her again, but different. She thought about James in his cell, about Sierra climbing her next ladder, about her father who'd never see justice. She thought about the $15 million she'd donated to domestic violence shelters, keeping only enough to live simply. Madison Sterling had won everything and lost everything. She'd been broken and rebuilt. She wasn't happy. Happiness was for people who hadn't seen behind the curtain. But she was free to. Her desk phone rang. Another victim, another story, another chance to turn pain into purpose. This is Madison Sterling. How can I help? The woman on the other end was crying, barely coherent. Madison listened, patient, understanding. She'd been there. It's going to get worse before it gets better, Madison said gently. But I promise you, you will survive this. And when you do, you'll be stronger than you ever imagined. How do you know? Madison looked at her reflection in the dark window, older, harder, but unbroken. Because I'm living proof. Now, let's talk about getting you free. As she talked another woman through her escape plan, Madison felt something she hadn't experienced in years. Peace. Not happiness, not victory, but peace. She'd lost everything that mattered. Her father, her innocence, her ability to trust. But she'd gained something too. The knowledge that she could survive anything and the power to help others do the same. Outside, Washington slept, unaware of the woman in the federal building who hunted predators in suits. Madison Sterling had become something James never anticipated. Not a victim, not a survivor, but a weapon aimed at men just like him. The phone rang again. Another woman? Another story? Another chance at redemption? Madison answered, ready to guide another soul through hell, knowing the path because she'd walked it herself, knowing that sometimes the only victory is staying alive long enough to help the next woman escape. The story ended not with happiness, but with purpose, not with justice, but with persistence, not with healing, but with the knowledge that some wounds become weapons in the right hands. Madison Sterling had been destroyed, but from those ashes, something harder and more dangerous had risen. A woman who knew that winning meant nothing if you lost yourself, and that sometimes the greatest triumph was simply refusing to disappear. In her small apartment that night, she looked at the photo she kept hidden, herself at her wedding, radiant with hope. That woman was gone, a casualty of James Sterling's war. But the woman who remained, scarred and cynical but still standing, she had her own worth. Not as a wife, not as a victim, but as proof that sometimes surviving is its own form of revenge. The city lights blurred through rain on her window. Tomorrow would bring more cases, more women, more battles. Madison Sterling closed her eyes, not at peace but at purpose, not healed but helpful, not whole but here. And for now, that was enough. 6 months later, Madison sat in a Seattle coffee shop, serving lattes to tech workers who never looked up from their phones. She'd legally changed her name to Sarah Walker, disappeared completely from public life. The FBI work had become too much, every case reopening her wounds, every woman's story echoing her own. She'd helped convict 12 more politicians, saved 37 women from similar fates. But the cost was her sanity. So she ran, sold everything, changed her name, became nobody. "Sarah, table 6 needs their order," her manager called. Madison, Sarah now, delivered the coffees with a practiced smile. The customers didn't look at her, just another service worker in their busy lives. Perfect anonymity. Until she saw the news on the shop's television. Sierra Wells arrested for embezzling from her new husband's campaign. The evidence? An anonymous tip with detailed financial records. Madison allowed herself a small smile. She might be hiding, but she was still watching, still fighting in her own way. A customer complimented her genuine smile as she refilled his coffee. "It's amazing what you can survive," she responded. The same words she'd practiced, the same mask she wore. As she turned away, the small recording device in her apron pocket captured his response. This customer was Judge Harrison's son, discussing bribes with his companion. Madison Sterling was gone. Sarah Walker was nobody. But underneath, the weapon James Sterling had inadvertently created remained, gathering evidence, protecting women, fighting a war no one knew was being waged. Table 6 still needed their coffee. Madison delivered it, ordinary and invisible, exactly as planned. The greatest victory wasn't the money or the conviction or the revenge. It was this: being free enough to choose her own war on her own terms, with no one knowing the barista who served their coffee was the woman who'd brought down some of the most powerful men in America. She wiped down tables, took orders, smiled at customers. Just another day in her new life, where every ordinary moment was a triumph over the man who'd tried to erase her. James Sterling had wanted her to disappear. She had, just not the way he'd planned. And from her invisibility, she continued to fight. One recorded conversation at a time, one anonymous tip at a time, one saved woman at a time. The coffee shop was busy, orders to fill, tables to clean, customers to serve. Madison moved through it all, efficient and unremarkable, exactly as she wanted to be, free.